The man without a mask. Imagine walking into a room full of people, each one wearing a mask. Some smiling, some frowning, none real. Every gesture calculated, every word filtered. Everyone performing. Now picture yourself stepping into that same room without a mask. No pretense, no agenda, just honesty, transparency, pure-hearted openness. How long before they call you naive or worse, a fool? This is the world Prince Myshkin walks into. The misunderstood soul at the heart of Dostoevsky's The Idiot. He's not lacking in intelligence. He's lacking in disguise. His sincerity is unsettling. His kindness, confrontational. He doesn't condemn. He reflects. And in that mirror, people see what they've hidden, even from themselves. Their hypocrisy, their fear, their mask. And so they reject him. Not because he's wrong, but because he's too real. So the real question isn't why they reject him, but why we do. What is it about true goodness that makes even us look away? The world rewards performance, not purity. We like to believe that society values goodness, that honesty, kindness, and moral integrity are admired. But the truth is, those virtues are often praised in theory and quietly punished in practice. Look at history. The individuals who rise to power, the ones who succeed, are rarely the most sincere. They're the most adaptable, the most perceptive. They know how to read a room, bend perception, shape opinion. As Machiavelli famously wrote in The Prince, a ruler must learn to act immorally when necessary, because the world rewards results, not virtue. That's not just political strategy. It's a reflection of the operating system behind most human interactions. In the workplace, for example, it's not always the most competent who move ahead. It's often the most politically aware, those who know when to speak, when to withhold, when to flatter, and when to shift blame. In leadership, we dolece charisma, confidence, control, but sincerity, vulnerability, moral idealism, these are often seen as weaknesses, or worse, liabilities. Even on social media, the game isn't truth. It's optics, engagement, signal without substance. Looking virtuous wins, quiet fear too pernicious. We reward those who appear generous, not those who quietly are. Why? Because strategic behavior isn't a flaw, it's an instinct. Project strength, conceal, fragility, control the frame. It's not cynicism, it's design. We're wired to protect the image, not the truth. Psychological studies have consistently shown that people are more likely to trust confidence than competence, more drawn to people who appear emotionally calibrated, even if they're being manipulative, and more suspicious of those who seem too honest, because total honesty disrupts the invisible agreements we rely on to maintain social comfort. This is why Prince Myshkin doesn't fit. He walks into society with no strategy, no calculated charm, no rehearsed persona. He is sincere. He says what he feels. He forgives when he is hurt. He offers compassion in spaces ruled by power games. And this doesn't make people admire him. It makes them uneasy. Because Myshkin doesn't just challenge their actions. He challenges the rules their lives are built on. To accept his presence would mean rethinking their own strategies, the masks they wear, the games they play, the compromises they've normalized. So instead of confronting that discomfort, they label him naive, childlike, an idiot, not because he lacks intelligence, but because he lacks armor. And so, when someone like Myshkin appears unguarded, uncalculated, he doesn't just confuse people, he threatens their entire way of operating. Kindness, without defense, is seen as weakness. In The Idiot, Dostoevsky paints a protagonist unlike any other. Prince Myshkin does not protect himself with irony. He does not calculate his moves or guard his emotions. He trusts openly. He forgives repeatedly. Even when betrayed, he remains compassionate. But rather than being praised for this purity, he is mocked, manipulated, dismissed. Because in a world that values defense, strategy, and emotional control, Myshkin's kindness is seen not as strength, but as a flaw. He's not playing the game. He's refusing to enter the arena altogether. And this makes people profoundly uncomfortable. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. We don't just fear being vulnerable. We fear being seen while being vulnerable. Psychologically, this is known as emotional exposure. The feeling that you're showing too much of your internal world to a world that may not know how to hold it, or worse, use it against you. And in highly competitive environments like corporate culture, elite academia, or even family systems built on hierarchy, emotional exposure becomes a liability. The open colleague gets ignored. The forgiving sibling gets dismissed. The quiet listener fades into silence. This isn't coincidence. It's a quiet pattern repeated everywhere. We associate openness with naivety. And in environments ruled by dominance and leverage, naivety is dangerous. But here's the paradox. We also admire kindness when it's distant enough not to challenge us. A quote frequently misattributed to Einstein says, "The world is a dangerous place, not because of those who do evil, but because of those who look on and do nothing." But what if the real danger is in how we respond to those who try to do good? Modern psychology tells us that emotional intelligence is not the same as emotional safety. You can be deeply empathetic and still be unprotected, still be misunderstood, even punished for it. Myshkin feels deeply, but walks without armor. It doesn't anticipate betrayal. He doesn't assume bad intentions. He doesn't build walls. And so, when others lie to him, hurt him, use him, he doesn't retaliate. He simply absorbs the blow and continues to give. Not because he's blind, but because he refuses to become what the world expects him to be: guarded, reactive, transactional. To many, that seems foolish, because we're taught to protect ourselves, to expect reciprocity, to measure our giving. But Myshkin's kindness is unconditional. And in a world governed by negotiation, unconditionality is alien. It threatens the subtle contracts we make with one another, the give-and-take dynamics that make relationships feel safe. If they give freely, what does that say about our conditions? And this is the hidden source of discomfort. Myshkin doesn't just offer kindness, he offers it freely, without strings, without calculation. And that unsettles people more than cruelty ever could. But what truly unsettles people about Myshkin is not just that he's kind, it's that his kindness reflects something we try to avoid: the mirror of goodness. There's a quiet tension that surrounds Prince Myshkin, not because he judges others, but because his mere presence reveals them. He doesn't call out hypocrisy. He simply exists in a way that makes it impossible to hide. His compassion isn't selective. His honesty isn't situational. His empathy doesn't come with a price. And in that unwavering clarity, people around him begin to see the fractures in themselves. This isn't a literary device. It's a psychological phenomenon known as cognitive dissonance, the inner discomfort we feel when our actions conflict with the values we claim to hold. Most people walk around with a carefully crafted story about who they are. I'm a good person. I care about others. I'm fair. But when someone like Myshkin enters the room, that story is silently challenged. Because his goodness isn't theoretical, it's lived. It exposes the gaps between what we say and what we do, between our intentions and our behaviors. And that gap is uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. In fact, that instead of bridging it, we often attack the one who made it visible. This isn't limited to fiction. History in modern life is filled with examples of this dynamic. Consider the way society often treats its most selfless individuals. Whistleblowers who risk their careers for truth are painted as unstable. Activists devoted to justice are dismissed as idealists or extremists. Figures of moral clarity are mocked, labeled, and sometimes erased. Even saints are sanitized after death. Their radical compassion is softened, their suffering romanticized, because their real lives were too confronting, too uncompromising in a world built on negotiation and gray areas. We admire goodness from afar in biographies, in fiction, in curated legacy, but up close it unsettles. It challenges the unspoken contracts we all live by. Don't show too much. Don't give too much. Don't be too real. That's why, on social media, performative virtue thrives, because it creates the illusion of goodness without demanding actual transformation. A well-worded post, a filtered donation, a caption with the right hashtag. These things feel good, but they don't cost us anything. Not emotionally, not morally. Real virtue, however, the kind Myshkin embodies, requires vulnerability. It invites risk, and most dangerously, it questions everything around it, simply by being what it is. This is the real reason people distance themselves from Myshkin. Not because he's naive, but because he represents a version of humanity we've abandoned in the name of survival. He doesn't expose others by accusation. He exposes them by contrast. In his light, their shadows become visible. And not everyone is ready to see what's been hiding in the dark. This leads us to a disturbing realization. Maybe we don't reject the good because it's naive. Maybe we reject it because it's too real. The inevitable suffering of the truly good. If there is one pattern that repeats across history, philosophy, and literature, it is this: those who embody true goodness often suffer the most. Not because they are weak, not because they are naive, but because their very existence disrupts the systems built around power, control, and fear. Prince Myshkin is not destroyed because he fails. He's undone not by failure, but by staying true, like Socrates, who chose poison over compromising truth, like Jesus, who forgave as he was crucified, like Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, or countless unnamed souls who stood in peace and were met with violence. This is not coincidental. It is structural. True goodness, when lived without defense, breaks the rules of a world built on ego and control. It invites betrayal. It draws fire. Not because it is wrong, but because it refuses to play by the rules that protect corruption. French mystic and philosopher Simone Weil once said, "The extreme greatness of Christianity lies in the fact that it does not seek a supernatural remedy for suffering, but a supernatural use for it. In other words, suffering is not something to be erased. It's something to be transformed. A similar insight comes from Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, who wrote in Man's Search for Meaning, "In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment. It finds a meaning." These thinkers recognized what Dostoevsky understood, that suffering is not always the enemy. Sometimes, it's the proof that a person has remained true in a world that demands they compromise. Myshkin suffers precisely because he refuses to adapt to the world's cruelty. He does not trade authenticity for acceptance, and in doing so, he becomes both a target and a symbol. Here's the paradox. We often associate pain with failure, but what if pain, in the case of the truly good, is actually evidence of moral success? Goodness is easy when the world is fair, but to hold compassion through betrayal, clarity through chaos, and integrity under fire, that is the mark of the unshaken. It's not punishment. It's the price of not becoming what you resist. This is where Dostoevsky diverges from moral idealism. He doesn't suggest that the good are rewarded in this life, nor does he offer comfort in the idea that karma will balance the scales. Instead, he offers something far more uncomfortable and far more liberating, that the value of goodness lies not in its outcome, but in its essence. It's not about success, or recognition, or even legacy. It's about the choice moment after moment to remain untouched by the forces trying to harden your soul. And that choice often leads to suffering, but it also leads to something deeper, meaning coherence, a kind of inner freedom that cannot be bought or stolen. So if goodness leads to rejection, to suffering, even to destruction, why choose it at all? The quiet power of the misunderstood. Prince Myshkin does not lead. He does not preach. He does not try to convert anyone. And yet, he changes everyone around him, not through persuasion, not through argument, but simply by being there real. Unshaka, silent. This is the paradox of true goodness. It does not demand transformation, but it invites it, silently, powerfully, irrevocably. Even those who mock Myshkin cannot forget him. Even those who betray him remain marked by his compassion. He leaves behind no system, no ideology, no conquest, but he leaves behind a mirror that cannot be unseen. Modern neuroscience offers a clue as to why. In the brain, we carry what are known as mirror neurons, specialized cells that fire not only when we act, but when we observe another human being act. When someone shows authentic emotion, compassion, sorrow, forgiveness, our nervous system registers it. We feel it, even if we don't respond to it consciously. This is the essence of emotional resonance. It's why a single person, standing calmly in the face of cruelty, I can soften the room without saying a word. We've all experienced this. A teacher who believed in us when no one else did. A stranger whose kindness caught us off guard. A loved one who forgave what we thought was unforgivable. Moments that passed without fanfare, but echoed inside us for years. That is the kind of impact Myshkin carries. And it introduces a deeper, more subtle kind of influence, what we might call non-coercive transformation. Unlike manipulation, which pressures us to change, or motivation, which pushes us to act. This form of influence simply exists. It holds space. It reflects possibility. It doesn't speak to the mind, It stirs the soul, and while it doesn't always produce immediate change, it plants something. A seed, a discomfort, a whisper. This isn't the only way. This is why the world resists figures like Myshkin. Because he doesn't just make us uncomfortable, he makes us remember something we've buried. That goodness doesn't need approval to be real. It only needs to remain unchanged. In an age obsessed with results, visibility, and performance, that kind of steady presence is revolutionary. Because it doesn't aim to win. It doesn't try to dominate. It doesn't even seek to be understood. And yet, it lingers. It moves like water on stone, slow, but inevitable. Maybe true goodness doesn't change the world by force, but by reminding us what the world could be. The cost of choosing light. In the end, Prince Myshkin is not celebrated. He is not rewarded. He is not even understood. But perhaps that is not the failure of goodness. Perhaps it is its proof. Because to choose kindness in a world that runs on manipulation is not weakness. It is rebellion, a quiet, radical defiance against the systems that demand masks and reward masks. So ask yourself, where are you still hiding? Where have you traded sincerity for safety or compassion for control? This isn't a call to be reckless. It's not an invitation to martyrdom. It's a reminder that real strength isn't in outmaneuvering others. It's in refusing to become what the world insists you must be. To stay good without needing praise is to become untouchable. Because when your integrity is no longer for sale, when your light is no longer conditional, no system can control you. And that is the kind of freedom that can't be silenced, shamed, or showed. Not because the world changed, but because you did.